So hello, Marleen Sleeuwits. Thank
Hi.
you for being here for this conversation. So you were born in the Netherlands, right?
Yes, that's true. I've born and raised here. I'm originally from the east of the Netherlands, but I moved to The Hague when I was 17 to go to the art academy here.
And so now you are right now in your atelier, right?
Yes.
And did you spend the confinement in this area? Could you continue working during the lockdown confinement?
A little bit. I have two small kids. They're 4 and 6, so they were not in school. So we divided the homeschooling task, me and my husband. So I was every other day I was here in my atelier, in my studio, work. But especially in the beginning, I found it really hard to concentrate on being creative. Or so I did a cleaning up, and I did some practical things, but nothing more. Yeah. But now,
you are very interested in non-spaces in your work and in spaces. How would you describe this idea of non-spaces?
I'm not really particularly interested in non-space or space, but more in the state of how you feel when you are in a space that you are of which you don't feel any connection with. So that are often non-spaces or generic spaces you can find everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So look similar everywhere, doesn't matter where you are. So and therefore you don't have a connection with that, and it's also for me, because of the materials that are used there. They're very temporarily fake walls, false ceilings, laminate flooring, which is actually a photo print, a lot of prints of fake marble, things like that. I'm fascinated by these representations of something else in the actual world. Yeah.
Kind of illusion. You quite like to work with illusion.
Yeah.
How do you find these spaces? How
very differently. Sometimes I work on location. I started out in the last crisis, the financial crisis. There were a lot of empty office buildings, and I could work there sometimes for a year or half a year, and I could make my installations there. And now I also make installations inside exhibition spaces in museums, and also in my studio. And I worked on site a few times. I did a very big project in a former prison beginning of the year. So it varies a lot. Yeah.
How do you proceed once you have your space? So because there is a physical intervention on the space itself.
First I panic, and then I start most of the time working with the element that strikes me most. So for instance, the prison, there were a lot of observation rooms with a lot of windows, and through the windows you saw other reflections and other rooms, and so it was a bit of a maze where you didn't know where you looked at. So I photographed all these reflections, and I used them inside the installation with big wallpaper prints.
So you bring some new material within the space.
Yeah.
All kind of material. So you paint, you sculpt, you add some elements.
Yeah, I build new corners with wood, and I also work a lot with photography. So I photograph certain elements and use them inside the installation. Yeah. Can be details, but sometimes there are also big photo prints from a different corner of the room, which I make a repetition.
And then do you need still to do some digital interventions in the end once you have your final image?
The projects I do now mostly are first they are just installation. You can enter, you can see it, and actually it's a physical 3-dimensional site. And hopefully most of the time I also make a photo work out of it. So I take a photo from one corner, which I think is most interesting. So it continues to live on. I like that it's after it is demolished, there's still a photo print.
That documents actually.
Yeah, it's not document because I think documenting is not really interesting. So it has to be a specific corner of that installation that also has a quality of its own. It adds something, and it shows something else than the actual installation. So, or sometimes I work on that image or afterwards in Photoshop, or I'll make 3-dimensional elements inside the print. So I'll make cuttings inside the prints, or I add little mirrors, stuff like that. So it's
and the performative aspect, performativity seems quite also important in your work. Is that right? Is that something that you appreciate, to be performative on the space? This aspect of performance has an importance within your practice?
What exactly do you mean by the
performative? Yeah, I was wondering whether there was, because you go in the space and then you act on the space, and I was wondering, so you are physically involved in this process, and I was wondering whether you would perceive it in some ways as a sort of performance as well, or not, or if you wouldn't define it as such.
I never thought of it that way. No. No, it's an interesting thought, but I did not really think of it like that, because nobody ever sees it until it's finished. Oh, and especially before the works I made works that just existed in a photo. So it was just one little corner, which was really strange. And in the photo, it looked really big and massive. And when people came to this empty office buildings, they were always very disappointed. So like, oh, this is it? Yeah. So I would say it's not important in my
in your practice. And how long have you been working on this?
Document the process or anything.
Yeah. How long have you been working on these interiors?
I think for 10 years almost. Yeah. Before that, I photographed existing interiors, and I think in 2010 I started changing and building my own spaces. Yeah, and this gets. Yeah, it changes a lot. Now it's also installation and so 3-dimensional objects. And now I'm working on a new series where the line between the 3 and 2-dimensional element of the photo is disappearing. So that's new.
So your understanding of space has changed and evolved.
Yes, I think
from the beginning, and can you feel that?
Yes, my focus moved a little bit from this documenting non-spaces to what is space? How do we translate space in a 2-dimensional way? And is there what is photography in relation to space? Is there what is there in between? Is there something in between which you can play with that more interesting for me now at the moment, I guess.
Yeah, you play with our awareness of space, and then suddenly we start wondering, how do we personally interact as well with the space? I think it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, how do we interact and how do we not interact?
Mm-hmm.
That is always
Yeah.
something.
What are the biggest challenges that you face when you start a project or while doing a project?
The fear of starting. And I always for me it's always a thin line between being conceptual but also being free to just try and to be how do you say experimental.
Mm-hmm.
So I always, but once I start and I think, oh, there's something there, then I can continue. But before I always think way too much about new work. And then at a certain point, I postpone everything too long and then I'll start and then, yeah.
You deal with many projects at the same time, or you focus on one space and then you move to another space?
I prefer to work on one photo, one work. Yeah, it's yeah. Now I work on 2 photos, but one is in a commission and one is in my studio. So that is manageable for my head. Yeah.
You said that you were currently in your studio. Can you show us something of it? Maybe would be great.
Unplug. Oh, are you still there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Yeah, this is my studio. And we're renovating the building at the moment, so it's a bit of messy, but I'm really nice outside at the water. And well, this is my where I have my where I was just sitting. There is my little workstation where I do some Photoshop work, and there's a lot of storage. And this is a little corner where I'm making something new space, but it's not very interesting yet. But there will be photo prints added on the top. And what I do is I work with a lot of materials that I find in the empty building. So this is false ceiling plates.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing now is I'm adding neon paint on the little holes. So it gets some more decorative idea. And this is for a former project. I cut up a floor of a gym. And cut it up in 8,000 little pieces, and
I saw
I included
the work.
Yeah, so that's what I'm now printing at the printing studio. It's gonna be, this is one first test print. So yeah. And I'm also working on a site-specific installation for a museum in Ingolstadt, the south of Germany, and it will be opened in September. It was supposed to open in May, but it's postponed.
It was postponed. You can, in September, you will be able to.
Yeah, then it will definitely go on. So
great.
Yeah, at least something on because a lot of, I think 5 or 6 exhibitions have been cancelled or postponed. So it was a bit strange time to concentrate on what am I going to do. It's also nice because normally I always struggling with time and I don't have much time to make a new work. So
very looking forward to seeing your works on the booth of Galerie Bart.
Yes.
And as part of our virtual edition. So have a good day and thank you very much.
Thank you for the interview.
Bye. Bye.
Okay. Bye.